done bookkeeping transactions, or the other name is Introduction to Bookkeeping, as your first unit of your level 2 qualification. Either it's a bookkeeping or an accounting qualification. This is one of those most compulsory units you have to do to progress to the next level. And you also have to remember, historically, this unit meant to be the more challenging one for the students who have done this level 2 course. Normally, you expect the students to put in a lot of effort and time, like trying to get the concepts under this bookkeeping control unit clicking. The point the students normally struggle with is because this is not straightforward. They all like you have to think out of the boxes. For most of the scenarios, this is something what will happen in your real life. Double entry is fine. You know your debits, you know your debt click, you know your credits, you know your pearls, you know your Alice's. It's absolutely fine as long you know how to do your debits and credits and get your trial balance matching. Bookkeeping control unit goes well beyond that one, because you go from there to journals, you go there to reconciliations, and you're also going to the one we're going to cover today, the errors and the suspense account. So here, the first slide, I'm going to show you what is the errors and suspense account we're talking about. So normally in double entry, we expect everything to be perfect. Everything is fine. And what will happen? End of the day, your debits and credits are both matching and your trial balance should match. But what if there is an error there? How would we identify these errors? Can there be a point I can find the errors by doing some kind of a magical tricks? So we think about it. First thing is the journal. We learned about the journal last session. Journal is a book of prime entry for transactions you made in not qualify as something regular, which goes in a day book or a cash book. But in this scenario, we use the journal as for occasional entries. So when we do the journals, we do like payroll transactions or anything to do with the one-off things, writing off a suspense, an irrecoverable debt. But most likely the journals will be used to correct errors. When you make an error in your double entry, these journals will come up as handy. There will be something helping you to correct the errors. But there are two types of errors. One of the errors can be detected by the trial balance, because when you draw your trial balance, they should match with your debits and credits. What if those two doesn't match? What we going to do, we will create a suspense account, and then we can further investigate the accounts and find out how I'm going to balance the trial balance again by removing the suspense account after correcting the errors. But there are also types of errors you are not disclosed by the trial balances. So when you draw the trial balance will still match, but the accounts are littered with some errors there. Those errors are the errors we call that are not detected by the trial balance. For the purpose of the exam, you have to remember the types of errors which is not detected by the trial balance. You don't need to know the names of the first one. Errors detected by the trial balance, you don't need to know the names. But the errors not detected by the trial balance, you need to know the names. And we also will show you how to correct those errors. So they're saying here, if the trial balance does not match, that indicates one or more errors have occurred. Any entry where the total debit is different, your credit balance will cause the trial balance not to balance. This will require a suspense account to be opened and to balance the trial balance. And then also the purpose of the suspense account is two. One, we can hold the difference prior to its connection. That means whatever the suspense account balance, we'll come to that later. We'll show you how that works. We hold the trial balance prior to its corrections. And also we can use the suspense account as a temporary holding account, which we may not hear about it very often, because sometimes we know a transaction has occurred, but we only know part of the entry. We don't know where the second entry goes, because there's some confusion about the validity of that account, whether it has to be a new account or something of an existing account. We don't know about it. We just don't want to make a mistake. What we'll do, we'll keep the amount in the suspense account until we further clarify the problems. And then, of course, once the problem is clarified, the holding account can be basically cleared, and then we can carry on with our general activities. In this scenario, the trial balance become a temporary holding account. But the 6 errors we need to remember are these. There are something called error of original entry, an error of compensation, compensating error, error of omission, error of commission, error of principal, and reversal of entries. So you have to remember, guys, all of these errors, you need to remember them by names because they will give you an error and they'll ask you what type of error it is. So you have to be 100% sure which type of error it is. We'll go through every one of them with an example in a minute. But then also there are errors which will create a suspense account which is detected by the trial balance because your balances are not matching. We can think about a single entry error, a casting error, a transposition error, an extraction error, error of omission, and two sides entries into one side. Let me go through them quickly. What is the meaning of a single entry? Means we have done a debit or a credit instead of a debit and a credit. If I have a transaction, for example, I paid for insurance £100 from the bank. So the entry should be debit insurance account, credit bank account. What I done there, just I entered insurance. I completely forgot about the bank account. Because of that, you have too much on the debit and less on the credit there. So your trial balance will not match. So therefore, this is a single entry error which will be disclosed by the trial balance. What is the meaning of a casting error? Casting error is when you total something. So when you're totaling something, you make an error there, there will be a casting error. Okay, so therefore, the casting error could happen in what is that we call in the book of prime entry. When you go into total a certain column, like a total VAT and net column, you make a casting error there. Or you could have make a casting error when you're actually totaling a T account. We can make that error as well. What is the meaning of transposition error? The numbers are switched. So when you've done one entry as £56, and then the other entry you could have done £65. So therefore, one entry is correct, the other entry is wrong. That is a transposition error. What is the meaning of an extraction error? Extraction error is we have a balance on my T accounts and we're going to take that balance and put that in the trial balance. But when I'm going to do it, the amount was £100. When I put in the trial balance, I put £1,000. That is what we call an extraction error. And what is the error of omission? Similarly, I have an account with £200 balance on my T accounts, but when I have time to do that in my trial balance, I've forgotten that £200. That is an omission error. It's not the error of omission you see here. This is just an omission of that balance from the trial balance. We'll know how to correct them later. And what is the two entries on one side? So as you know, with your double entry knowledge, two entries, it needs to be one debit and one credit. What if I put two entries in debits or two entries in credits? That obviously going to have multiple imbalances. Therefore, because you're going to have the double the error on the one side because you put too much on one side and nothing on the other side there. So that is also considered will create an imbalance of the trial balance. Therefore, it will be resulting in a suspense account. Now, let's look at it further. What would you do when you make an error? How we correct it? So what we're asking you here, what entries did we make? What entries should you have made? And how do we correct this? They are the three questions we're going to ask there. So let's look at the example questions I have ready for you. Okay, so here I have several questions there we're going to look into, and then some journal entries associated with that. So here we have that 6 types of error, and these errors are the ones not going to create an imbalance on the trial balance. That means this is not disclosed by drawing the trial balance. Okay, so let's look at the conditions when you do a double entry. That is always has to be 2 or more accounts. You need to have 2 or more accounts when you have, and you also have to have one debit or one credit minimum on both sides. So therefore, you can have multiple entries in credit, one debit, or multiple entries into the debit and one credit. It does not matter as long the total amount is equal to each other. Can you remember when we do a sales daybook transaction? So if you have here total, VAT, and net, and what we're going to have here for a net of £100, this is your sales daybook. Okay, so if you do it, so here, this is 120 and this is 20. Can you notice these two will be equal to that figure? But these two will go into VAT account credit, sales account credit, and this one will need to go into RLCA debit. Okay, so can you see the condition here? As long as you've done these two in credit side and that too into your debit side, or that one into the debit side, your trial balance should automatically come up with a balancing figure without any imbalances. So therefore, that is a condition. But certain scenarios, the conditions can be still met, but there is a possibility your accounts contain some errors here. So let's see that example of it. One, a sales credit note has not been entered into the account. What is the meaning of that? They haven't entered. It means they completely forgot about that. So that will be called the error of omission. Can you see that here? Error of omission. So what I will do, I will quickly write that here. Can I write it? Text box insert. Text box. Yeah, text box. Okay, so I think I have certain spelling mistake there. Can't get that right. Okay, so we have the error of omission there. But how would you correct this if you have this error? How I'm going to correct this error? So here, the error is because we completely forgotten about it. So let's say here, the sales credit note, don't worry about the VAT here. It is been written on this returns day book, sales return day book. We have the credit note for the value of, say, 60 pounds. So it needs to be these two. I'm not going to be worried about the VAT. How I'm going to correct this? Because it's been omitted, what we need to do, we have to make sure you put the right entry again in the system. So therefore, the entry will be RLCA, and this is going to be how much for 60 pounds. But is it going to be a debit or a credit? Remember, a sales credit note is going to be reducing the balance. So it is going to be a debit entry, or sorry, credit entry. Let me just make this all center aligned. Yeah, okay. And then we have sales returns, and they will be having 60 pounds and X. But remember, guys, I talked about the journals last time. When you do a journal entry, we need to say why we make this journal entry. So there needs to be some sort of a narratives for that one. So let's say what narrative you think you can think about this one. So if somebody asks you, what is the reason behind this particular transaction? So I would say here, correction of error of omission. I will say this way. That way, the narrative is going to be fine. In the exams, you don't have to type it. You have to choose from a drop-down menu or a drag and drop box. Okay, so just be careful with that one. What we need to do, error of omission related to sales returns. So I'm just going to make this slightly smaller. So yeah, I can't go any further than that. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, now the next error is bank interest received has been debited. Let me make it smaller so that way. All borders, no borders. Okay. So here the next error is the bank interest received has been debited to interest received and credited to bank. So what should have happened? What should have happened is, in this scenario, you have to remember, when you receive interest, I need to remember the money coming into the bank, and bank interest is itself, it is a income. So therefore, credit into the interest received account and debit into the bank account. That should have been happening. So here, bank interest received, I should say £100. This is going to be a credit entry, and bank should be £100 debit. This is what should have happened. But what happened instead, though? Instead of that, we made an error. The entry was swapped. So this is what happened now. How I'm going to correct this? You have to remember, there is two ways you can do that one. The first way is, we have to remember, the first step we always take is to remove incorrect entries. So How I'm going to remove an incorrect entry? If I make an entry somewhere, I have to remove it. I can't tip exit out. I can't just press the delete button anywhere. What I need to do, I need to find an entry which I can do on the opposite side. So what is the entry will be? Exactly same like this way. This one is the original entry. What it will do, it cancel this entry. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say bank interest received £100, and I will say here credit, and bank account £100 debit. But is that enough? No. What we need to do, we also have to enter the right entry. What is the right entry? It's the same entry again. So can you see this one here? It is exactly going to be the same thing again. What I will do, I will, oh, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to copy this transaction and I paste it again. So for this one, can you notice I have done one journal entry here to stop, or means remove the incorrect entry, and the second journal entry means it's always a pair of entries. This one is to correct the entry. Some people may ask me, Mo, why can't I put them both together? It's absolutely fine. You can do both of them together as well. So you could do an entry like £200 and £200. If you notice that here, bank interest received, there are two credit entries for £100 each, but you can do one entry for £200. That's also fine, but it depends on how many boxes you see in the exam screen. Do not do two entries when you have 4 lines for your journal, but if you have 2 lines, try not to do this method because it is not enough space to write all your transactions. So you can merge these 2 entries, these 2 merge together. I can just highlight it quickly, that one and that one. You can merge it, and this one can be merged that way. So they both will be merged into that entry, and that too will be merged into this entry. Okay, so that's another way of doing that one. So what is that error we're going to call here? This is going to be called reversal of entry. So it's going to be the reversal of entry. So let me just quickly say here with my words, reversal. If I get my spelling right, yeah, reversal of entries. The third one is a cost of computer repairs has been debited to the computer equipment account. So now again, we could have a same narrative here. We can say here in this one, the narrative is correction of reversal of entries. So we could have done that way. That is absolutely fine. Third one is the cost of computer repairs has been debited to the computer equipment account. Can you see here? These are 2 entries. This been debited, could have been the either way. But when you remember, when you look at the computer equipment, that is an asset. And the repairs to the computer are there not going to increase the value of your computer. Basically, that is to upkeep your computer. So therefore, they are your expenses. In this case, if I do this way, what will happen? It inversely, like what we call again, it will incorrectly increase the value of your assets, which is not right. Why? Your computer doesn't increase in value. That's not gold. Unless it is a gold computer, you never know. But that computer equipment meant to go down in price. So by putting the expenses onto the debit side, it will increase the value of that computer, which is absolutely wrong. We call this an error of principle. That means we record the entry into a wrong type of account. So the entry should have been, let me just quickly erase this and blank this. That should have been computer repairs debit £100, and bank should be credit £100. This is what should have happened, but instead of that, I put computer at cost. So this is incorrect. I need to go back to the original way of it. But there is a problem. in the last time, I have to do 2 entries because I have to correct both of the entries because they are both wrong. In this scenario, only this one is incorrect. This one is incorrect. This one is fine. There is no problem with it. If there is no problem with it, there is no reason you have to amend it. What we'll do, we will remove this incorrect entry. So how I'm going to remove it? The entry will be, if I want to remove it, it has to be computer at cost. We're going to say credit £100. And then what we'll do here, enter the correct entry, and that will be computer repairs. It's going to be debit £100. This way, what we'll do, we will clear the balance from this computer at cost account. We remove that £100 and we enter the amount in here. So the journal entry will show here computer at cost £100. I'm keep putting £100 here. I'll just find a different one. I should say, let's say, yeah, that's okay. I already started it, so it's fine. Computer repairs £100, and this is going to be debit. So what we're going to do here, the journal entry will say to you, correction of error of principal involving computer repairs. Okay, give me 1 second, please. Call it this time. Next one. It says here, the purchase has been undercosted by £80 and the balances of the discount allowed account is £80 less than it should be. We will look into that last, okay? We will see that as last option. We'll skip to the next one and then see what we can do with that. So we're going to say here, this one is principal, okay? And then let's look at this one here. A purchase invoice from K Burns Limited credited to the account of K Burning Limited. So what happened here? You have 2 invoices from 2 different suppliers. No, it's 1 invoice from 1 supplier. It's been entered into another supplier account. So in this supplier account, what will happen? When you put this purchases account, it's only affecting the subsidiary ledger. This is a classic example of what we call an error of a commission. So here, so I'm going to quickly copy this, paste it here. So I'm going to say here, this is the error of commission. There's another example error commission as well, but I'll explain to you what happened here. The question we have, we have an invoice. So what is that going to be? It's going to be 2 different accounts. One of them is going to be PLCA credit £400, purchase debit £400. We're not worried about the VAT here, okay? Don't worry about the VAT now. We just only look at the invoice value. But when we done this, we also have to go into your subsidiary ledger. So it's going to be on the payable ledger. I'm going to go there. I'm going to put this into K Burns Limited. This is what I should have done. I should credit them £400. But what we have done here, instead of doing here, we're going to put it to K Burning Limited. So what we done, we put in the wrong account, completely wrong account now. But how we going to make an entry correcting this error? If I'm going to correct this error, the first thing you need to acknowledge, we cannot write the subsidiary accounts in your journal. You still have to identify which general ledger account is affected by this. In this scenario, it is PLCA. So what we're going to do, we're going to debit PLCA by £400. And then again, we have to credit PLCA by £400 because this involves a subsidiary ledger account. But both scenarios, in the brackets, I'm going to say here, K burning, and here, next one is K burns. Okay, so in this scenario, what we have identified, this errors could have been corrected if I done it this way. Okay, so this way we're removing the K burning £400 from their account for the purchase invoice, and then we put it into K burns because that is where it should have been originally. So what details I'm going to write here? We're going to say correction of an error of commission related to purchase invoice. Okay, that's fine. We could have done it that way. That is absolutely fine. Next one is we have a cash sales of £204 including VAT has been entered into the cash book as £240 including VAT. So what happened here in this scenario? We put incorrect amount. We may have done the right accounts to go all together with, but when we done that in the cash book, we have entered that as £240 including the VAT here. So there could be multiple accounts involved in here now. Excuse me. So how I'm going to correct it now? First, look at the scenario. What is the incorrect entry? So the incorrect entry is, originally it should have been bank £204 and VAT is going to be equal to that divided by 6, and then we have to have sales £170. Okay, so this is what should be in the entry. I think, let me see, cash book 204 including VAT has been entered in the cash book as £240 including VAT. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so this should be the right entry. So when we're going to say here, this is going to be debit and this is credit and this is credit. But what we've done here now, £240, £40 and £200. Now what we've done here, we have done everything incorrectly now. Everything is being correct incorrectly. All three accounts has been affected, but your debits and credits are absolutely fine. There is no need to change your debits and credits because they're in the right area, but only the amounts are incorrect. There is two ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the shortest way, not the longest way. Okay, I'll show you the shortest way first, then I'll show you the longest way. Remember when I showed you this time? What we do normally when we make an error like that way, we need to first remove all of these amounts. So what we'll do, we'll go to the journal and we put them credit, debit, and debit. So what we've done here, we remove this incorrect entry. Oh, sorry. No, we should have done this one. This is the incorrect entry, 40, 200. Yeah, this is what done. This is should be. This is should be. And what's done? Okay, so here, this amount, we need to remove it by doing this entry. So once we've done that, you'll be able to enter the new entry of this amount into the journal. But I'm going to show you most likely the one they're going to give you in the exam. In the exam, they will probably give you this method here. Can you see here what happened to my bank account? It's been entered too much on that debit side. The debit side should be only £204, but how much it should be? It's only 204. They entered 240. So what we need to do, we need to take away the £36 different on the credit side. So what we're doing now, from 240, we crediting £36 on that account. Therefore, it will bring the number back to £204. You basically reducing the balance there. If that is under, if they put a number below that, we need to put something on the debit side to increase it. But in this scenario, because we already posted too much, we had to put that on the credit side to remove it. Similarly, these two accounts will also have the same impact. So what's the crack with the VAT account? VAT account, the difference of £6 will be entered on the debit side. And then the sales account will have £30 on the debit side, because all three of them has been overstated. All three numbers were overstated. Therefore, what we need to do, we need to make an entry like that way to remove this error. And what is the narrative's going to be? Narrative's going to be, we're going to say here, this is going to be an error of original entry corrected. Okay, error of original entry corrected. It could have been or correction of error of original entry involving a cash sales transaction. We could have done that way as well. It's absolutely fine. Okay, so here we're going to say it is going to be a original entry. So let me quickly go here, Control C, Control V. Original entry. So that leaves you with this fourth option. The fourth option is one of the rarest thing you're ever going to see. You're not going to see that every day. You're going to see that once in a while. This is what we call the error of compensation. So here, let me say here, compensation error. So error of compensation, it seldom happens because there are two errors. They're not connected to each other. By the luck of chance, they cancel each other out. So what happened here? If you undercast your purchases account, when you're going to total your purchases account, you have so much money there. Let's say here, so £100, £200, and £400. So when you're totaling it, somehow I put £620 there. So instead of £700, I put 620 as my total. So my purchases account has wrong amount in my book. And then also, you have to remember that is a debit balance. So debit, it's got 720, but it should have been £700. So it's 620, but should have been £700. And then also there's an other error, discount allowed account. It is also £80 less than it should be. So here they have possibly overcasted that one. So that is an entry we've done too much there. So when we've done that, it has £80 less. That means it should be. Therefore, the amount is overcasted by £80. So what would you do in this scenario? We need to make a correction on both of those accounts. One of them, purchase has been undercast. That means we need to put more £80 there. So let's say here, purchases £80 debit, and here discount allowed £80 credit. Because normally by itself, this will create a suspense account. Luckily, they both amount are for same. Therefore, what happens? They cancel each other out. Your trial balance are both still matching, but the accounts were fundamentally in error there. So these are the 6 type of errors you get questions on. You have to think about how you correct this. Now, let's say here, a couple of like the choices question here we have. First one, recording a prompt payment discount allowed correctly into the general ledger, but not recording in the subsidiary ledger. Will that cause an imbalance or will that be fine? If I'm going to consider it right, in this scenario, the trial balance will not be affected because they have incorrectly entered only in the subsidiary ledger, which won't impact the general ledger. So therefore, this one I will say will not disclose by the trial balance. What error we can ask about it? This could be an error of what is that again? It could have been an error of commission, could be, yeah, but it could be something different. I wouldn't say too much about it, but this is only one side of the the general ledger is not incorrect. They're all fine, but only in the subsidiary ledger. So that is not going to impact the trial balance. Recording a cash sales as a debit to the receivables accounts and credit to the sales account. So when I'm going to look at it here, a cash sales, when I'm going to make a cash sales, you need to debit bank and credit sales account. But in this scenario, they have debited the receivable accounts. So will that create an imbalance on the trial balance? No, this is an error of principle. Bank account and the receivable account, it can be an error of commission as well. We will see that bit later. In this scenario, both of them are debit. So instead of bank, I'll put in the receivables account. My debits and credits will match still. So this will not disclose by the trial balance because your conditions are all met there. And omitting a credit sales to receivable completely from the both general and the subsidiary ledger. So they're saying here a credit sale to a receivable completely. So therefore, what type of error it is, guys? This error, we call it error of omission because we completely forgot about it everywhere. This will create an imbalance. Now it will be nothing there in the system. So therefore, this not will be disclosed by the trial balance. Fourth one, recording purchases invoices on the debit side of the payable ledger control account and the credit side of the purchases account. So they're saying here purchases for invoices in the debit side of the payable ledger control account and the credit side of the purchase account. It has been reversed. Remember, one of the 6 errors we have come across, one of them is the reversal of entry because we still have a debit, we still have a credit. It does not matter. This will create your trial balance match because end of the day, whatever you enter there, it will not impact the overall numbers. So this will not be disclosed by the trial balance. Fifth one, I have 4 in a row. Let's see, maybe one of them is going to be on the left-hand side one. Recording cash received from the receivable on the receivable ledger account only. Okay, so when we've done that, we're making only a single entry. There is no entry into the debit side of the cash book. Cash book should have had a debit entry. We have only made an entry into the control account, which is only one side. So the other side doesn't have an entry. This will create imbalance. So therefore, the trial balance will disclose this error. The next one is recording a payment of £300 to a credit supplier as debit PLCA 300, credit bank 30. This will create an imbalance. Can you see here? £330. There is a £270 discrepancy there, and between them, the trial balance will not match. Now let's look at the next question, shall we? The next question is, these are the the questions related to the suspense accounts there. So remember, let's go back to slides again. So here, where's my slide? Here you go. Yeah, on the slides there, how we make the correction. So they're saying here, what entries did we make, what entries should be made, and how do we correct this? So our onus is now back to us, how we going to record that in the journal. Okay, so let's say here what scenario we can come up with. So they're saying here £700 has been debited to the suspense account. So let's say here balance go down £700. We started the suspense account with £700 because there's an imbalance somewhere. They're saying here the 2 following errors have been discovered. One of them saying a payment for rent of £200 has been recorded in the cash book, but no other entries have been made. So what you need to remember, the first scenario is what should be the right entry? What should be the right entry when you make payment for rent? We're going to say debit rent account £200, credit cash account or bank account. So cash book, say bank. Okay, so credit bank £200. What happened here? This they have done. They have recorded into the cash book. They have done this one, but they forgot to do this one. This one is not done. What we need to do, we need to make an entry here. So the first entry is enter the right amount. So we're going to say here rent £200, and it has to be a debit or a credit entry. It's still a debit entry. Where's the credit entry? Bank account does already have an entry, so there is only one account we can think of. We're going to say suspense account, £200 credit. So when we done that here on the suspense account, I can simply say rent £200, because remember, on the suspense account we need to make a £200 entry, which we done on the credit side. The detail is because of rent. Is the suspense account cleared already? No, we still have some balance there. I need to make sure I clear that balance. Okay, now let's look at the next entry here. Payment for heat and light of £250 has been posted to the credit side of the expenses account. So what happened here? We say debit, heat and light, yeah, and credit bank. This is what I should have done. But what I have done here, instead of that, I also done this on the credit side. So here, 250 and 250. So this account is incorrect. Instead of a debit entry, we have the entry on the credit side. So how I'm going to correct this? There's two ways to correct it. One is I have to do it once and then suspense, and then again I'll do the same entry again. I have to do suspense. Or we can do one big correction entry. Why? If I put something on the wrong side, to make it right, we have to do that twice. That means first thing is if I debit heat and light for £250, what it does, it cancels the incorrect entry, isn't it? But if you do that twice, it will bring that balance back to the right side. So what we're going to say here, heat and light, £500 debit, and we will have suspense, £500 credit. So now go back to here, and I'm going to say heat and light, £500. What happened to the suspense account now? Can you see here? This £500 both match each other. It clears the suspense error. So if you get a question like that way, these are the journal entries going to be for that. Now let's look at the next one. We have £4,700. Let me erase all of it. I don't need all of it now. Let me clear this. We have second part of the question here. We are opened £4,700 suspense account and it is debited. So we have significant error there. So balance board down. So what we got here, an amount for £15,000 has been incorrectly posted as £10,000 in receivable ledger control account. This amount related to sales to customers on credit. So what they're saying here, I have put the amount supposed to be going to the receivable ledger control account as £15,000. I put that down as £10,000. So for example, it should be debit RLCA 15,000, and I say, oh, hold on. Why are I going too far? Okay, so here, credit sales 15,000. This is what should have happened, but instead of that, I have that number. So what happened here? I have undercasted my RLCA, means I put less on my RLCA and it create an imbalance on the trial balance. What we need to do, the correction is going to be in this scenario. We have to RLCA debit that by 5,000 because we have to put more on that side. And then we will say suspense account, £5,000 credit. So here the entry will be RLCA and £5,000. What we done here, we put this balance which we undercast or means undervalued, we're putting it back into the RLCA on the debit side there. Okay, so now let's look at the next part of it. The amount of £300 has been omitted from the discount received account. So if I'm going to look at that discount received account, it needs to be PLCA, hold on, I don't need that color. I'll have it automatic. That one. So it's going to be okay here. So when I'm going to have a discount received, PLCA will be a debit entry and credit discount received. So this is the amount it should have been, £300 and £300. But what happened here, according to them, this one wasn't entered at all. So if that was omitted, what we need to do, we need to say discount received £300 on the credit side, because this is what we missed. Because the debit entry is already there, we use the suspense account to clear that error, £300. So let's say here £300 debit, we'll say discount received. Can you notice that again? If you add these two numbers, it balances your suspense account, which is already being created for £4,700. So what we're going to say to ourselves, the suspense account now is there. We found the errors, we clear the errors, like they both disappeared. On both scenarios, suspense accounts were there, and now it's gone after we found the errors and corrected those errors. Now let's look at an exam style question. This happened to come up on many of the exams I used to do on the previous qualification. On the new qualification, it's very seldom it come up, but if it come up, you know how to correct them, because this is from the day book. That means it possibly could be something called a casting error. But let's say here, how we going to identify this? They're saying here, suspense account, different of £54 was placed into the suspense account. The trial balance did not balance, and they didn't say that amount either a debit or a credit. But it does not matter to me. All I need to know, the £54, it is the error is also going to be for £54. Let's find out what could be the error behind it. So when I'm going to look at it, these numbers, I think is something fishy. If I'm going to look at it here, if I total this column, 2448, if that total that column 488, when I cross-cast it with this total columns, that should come up as 2928, not 2982. So what they have done here, they have made something called a transposition error. So the entry was in the system like this way. They have done, because it's a sales day book. So they say RLCA debit 2982. VAT, they have done credit 488, and then also they done sales credit 2440. Which one contains the error? Only the RLCA bet. These two are absolutely fine. There is no need to change any of it. So the job is for us to identify the error. They're asking here, remove the incorrect entry. So they remove the incorrect entry means this entry has to be reversed. It needs to be removed from the system. What we're going to do, we're going to say RLCA for the amount of 2982. And is that going to be a debit or a credit? I'm going to say it is a credit. So here I have to change that to credit. Yeah, it's going to be a credit entry. Why is that? Because this one was originally on the debit side. Now I need to make sure I remove that incorrect entry. Now they ask you to enter the right entry. So let's say here right entry will be RLCA 2928. This is the amount it should have been there. So for me, I have identified the errors. I remove the incorrect entry. Now I have also remove the incorrect entry and enter the right entry. But there's a problem. Can you see here in your journals, when we do a journal entry, your debits and credits should match. Can you see on all your previous entries? Can you see the journals? Debits and credits are matching. 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 Here, every one of them, your debits and credits are matching. So if you even look at that here, your debits in these two equal to that credit there. So therefore, what we need to do, we need to involve the suspense account because this is an error only on one of those accounts to find the difference. How much is the difference between those two numbers? And you got it there. That is that £54 we have found at the beginning of that question. And which side that's going to be entered into? Please remember, you look at to balance your journal. The only place you can balance it is on the debit side. So that means here, these two debit entries will be equal to that one credit entry there. So therefore, this suspense account was initially on the credit side of the trial balance because I have had £54 less on the credit side because I put too much on the debit side. Can you see that amount? We have add too much on the debit by £54. Therefore, the suspense has a bigger amount, or sorry, the trial balance had a bigger amount on the debit side than the credit side. Therefore, the suspense account was created on the lower side for the amount of 54. So once we done this error, we corrected it, the suspense account cleared itself. Now let's look at one more exam style question. This question comes up very often. Okay, so let's say here, 290, 270. All right, so here the trial balance for the Lawrence & Co. include a suspense account. All bookkeeping errors now have been traced and journal entries have been prepared. Now what we need to do, we need to enter this into the general ledgers after that. So what job we have to do now, we need to make sure we put all of them into general ledger. I think it's 220, I think 230, 230, 230. Yeah, it was 230. Yeah, it is 230. Now, the first entry we need to do, we need to identify what accounts and what details we're going to write here. So the journal entry here, from that, it says journal has 195 debit and the suspense have 195 credit. So the detail I'm going to write here is suspense account, because this is how they want you to do. You need to use the drop down menu to choose what accounts they're talking about. This is after we done the journal entries, how we enter them on the general ledger. So this is the general ledger. It may already have another balance there, but we don't care about it. It's how we enter them in the system. Now let's look at the next one, £425 on the suspense account debit. Sales has 425 on the suspense account. No, sorry, on their account on the credit side. We'll say here suspense. And here we're going to say sales. And the last but the least, we have vehicle expenses 80 on the debit side. And then on the vehicle account, 80 on the credit side. Remember the one we discussed that first time? Computer costing. Can you notice that here? They put it on the wrong type of account, which is the error of principle. This is what we are correcting here. So we're going to say here, this one is vehicle expenses. And this one we're going to say vehicles. That's it. This one is simply how we post those entries into the general ledger. So whatever suspense account balance we had, now because we have entered all of these numbers, it cleared itself now. There is no more suspense balance on this T account. But these things are the balances we can add to those numbers to carry on. So let's look at a further question quickly. This further question is, Emma and Kaylee runs a small business. They use the manual accounting system and have prepared a trial balance. The trial balance shows a debit of 56,789 and the total credits 54,320. They're asking you what is the suspense account balance in the trial balance there. So when you look at it here, we have more on the debit side and less on the credit side. Therefore, the suspense account balance £2,469 has to be on the credit side. So what we now will do, quickly copy one of the suspense account we had initially here. There you go, suspense account. We'll keep that in mind. I'm going to copy that one, and then I'll go to this here, and I will have that balance entered in the system. So let's say here it's on the credit side, so we say balance carry or balance brought down for the amount of 2,469. We'll keep that ready, 2,469. We have that amount there. But let's say here, after we corrected these two errors, the balance is getting removed or not. Let's check it. Okay. First thing is complete the table below with the debits and credits to be processed to clear the suspense account. The first error is commission received account for the March 2025 was £2,560. That was entered into the bank account correctly and no other entries were made. So what we need to remember, what is the debit? The debit should be, it's a commission received. So it's going to be bank, and that's for 2560. Credit should be commission received account, and that is going to be for 560. But what they're saying to me, this was not done. So if that is not done, what we need to do, we have to go there and enter that one. So we're going to say here commission received, and this is going to be 2560 on the credit side because it's an income account. This wasn't entered. Now we're entering it. Since the bank account has already been there, only account I can enter now is the suspense account. Suspense account 2560. So let's say here 2560. Here we say commission received. Is that cleared my suspense account yet? No, hasn't cleared it yet. So we need to find a way to correct the second error and see whether that clears my suspense account balance. So say here, a daybook total of sales return for March 2025 is £1,545. The amount entered in the sales return account was 1,454. So what they have done here, we have done everything correctly, but we have entered the amount incorrectly. So here, I'm not going to be bothered about what was this. They should have entered. It needs to be RLCA credit for 154. Yeah, this is what it should be. This is what it should be. But what they have done, credit RLCA 1454. So we basically entered what happened. This is what happened now. What we do, did we put enough or less? As far as I know, the sales return account, no, hold on, this is the sales return account they're talking about. So it's not RLCA. So this is debit sales returns. So this is going to be debit sales return. So my apologies, guys. So what they're saying here, the amount was entered into the sales return account. Sales return account is a debit account. We put 1545. That is the amount it should be. But what we entered is 1454. Therefore, there is a discrepancy. How much is the discrepancy there? There is for the amount of £91. We need to add more on the sales return account to get to that figure. So what we will do here, we'll say sales return £91 debit, and here the suspense account will be £91 credits, because they didn't mention about the error happen anywhere else. They only said the sales return account, it should add 1545, but they had 1454 instead. Okay, 1545, 1454. £91. Yeah, it's a £91 error there. So what we done here when we look at that sales return, so we say here sales returns for £91. So now can you total these two, this plus that number? It will give me 2560, which is going to be equal to that number as well. So what happened to the suspense account after we cleared all those errors? gone. Suspense account, it exists for that purpose alone. We create the suspense account at the beginning when the trial balance are not matching. Once we find the errors, and what we'll do, we clear the errors, and then the suspense account balance will clear itself completely. One more quickly, if I do that. So here, let's see the numbers they have here. They ask you, this is a whole question in the exam worth 8 to 10 marks. So please make sure, stay with me and I'll show you how this works, because normally this is the last question on the POBC exam. And students, please remember when you're doing the exams, the questions, the last two are the ones you can get the full marks there. So if you get stuck anywhere early and if you think you're going to be running out of time, move on, go to the last two questions. There are 20 marks to be grabbed there, which is, if you prorate it, it's 24 marks because it's out of 80 the exam is scored. So therefore, if you get 20 on overall results, you get 24 marks for those two questions. So please remember, these questions are gimme, and people see how much they waste their time on the early questions and they miss out on the easier question at the end later on. So let's say here that suspense account has already been sorted, so we don't need to worry about it. Only thing we need to update is the capital account and the payable ledger control account. Everything else seems to be fine. So let's say here sales, there's no change, 15869. And the purchases account has 18987, bank account 8061, then office equipment £5,000, receivable ledger control account 12609, and the payable ledger control. Payable ledger control has a journal entry to amend. So therefore, what we're going to have 748 plus 1560. That is the new amount. This one, you get 2 marks for that. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you have 8, 9. So 9 marks for the amounts you're going to enter here. So next one is capital. There's another £5,000 capital. It was recorded only to the bank account. So that's going to be for the 10,000 amount. And this total will give you 1 marks there. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 10. So let's say here, I'm going to total the numbers. I hope I get the same number here as well. So if I'm going to total all of it, yes. Can you see these two numbers? They both are matching. So can you remember? The trial balance only matches once we clear the suspense account. If I only done these numbers, for example, if I put 7408 and then I put 5000, this is imbalanced now, because why? The suspense account balance weren't clear. But once I added those two journal entries into those general ledger accounts, can you notice that now this number has changed and it is now matching your trial balance? Okay, that is the magical part of the suspense account. Again, I tell you, suspense account is there purely to make sure you find the errors, correct the errors, and then what are you going to do? You clear the suspense account balance. And then what happens to your trial balance after that? Magically, they're both matching. So it is a good way of demonstrating of all the thing we've done so far. And this is a really good example of it. I have to thank both Osborne Books and Kaplan Publishers because the questions I'm using, it's from their either their tutor resources or from their workbooks, which is seldom used by many other tutors as well. But this one is a real good examples to show you the benefits of using those question banks to help you learning this complicated matter of suspense account and errors.